You are standing in a cold room, coat still on, one hand pressed to an icy window. Your shoulders stay tight anyway. The heater glows across the floor, and a blanket hangs over a chair like something you should be able to trust. But your body keeps pulling toward that warmth. Not because the room is freezing. Because comfort still feels temporary. The obvious explanation is simple. This is just being cold. But if that were the whole answer, a heated room would make it disappear. Instead, the body reacts as if cold exposure is still near. The breath stays shallow. The hands stay tense. The mind keeps checking the heater, as if the warmth might slip away the moment you stop watching it. That is the strange part. Indoors, behind glass, with a wall at your back, the old alertness can still rise. Why would a safe room feel like a place where warmth has to be guarded? Why does your body treat heat like something that can vanish? The answer reaches far back, to when cold was not an inconvenience but a direct pressure on survival. Somewhere in that long human past, warmth meant cover, company, and one more night made possible. Why does warmth indoors still feel like a survival need? For ancient humans, cold was not just weather passing over skin. It was wind at the edge of a shelter wall, wet ground under bare feet, and night arriving over a small group that still had miles of exposure behind it. If a child drifted too far from the cluster, if shoulders stayed wet, if a resting body cooled too long, the cost could become real fast. Hands stiffened, movement slowed. A person who could not keep up could become a burden or a loss. The record of small band living makes that pressure plain. People depended on a few others for warmth, rest, and watchfulness. A shelter was not a soft backdrop. It was a boundary against the cold. Close bodies in a doorway mattered. A bundled shoulder mattered. Even the space between adults and a child tucked inside that circle mattered. In that world, there was no easy indoor refuge waiting in the background. There was only the edge of protection, and the need to keep everyone inside it long enough to survive the night. What did cold exposure force humans to do together? That pressure did not appear once and fade. It returned with weather, with darkness, with travel, with thin cover and open ground. A family moving across a bare stretch could not wait for the body to complain loudly. They had to notice the first chill on skin, the first clumsy hand, the first moment when a rest place no longer felt safe. The body learned the difference between a mild evening and a night that could take too much. Comfort still feels temporary because ancient cold did not stay polite. It came through a cracked opening in a wall, over wet earth, beside a sleeping child, into the hollow behind the ribs where heat is lost first. That is why the reaction can feel bigger than the room in front of you. The room is present, but the old pressure is too. So the body did not learn a calm theory. It learned a warning. A shoulder stayed hunched near a shelter edge. Fingers went numb before the rest of the body seemed ready. Eyes kept drifting toward the place where warmth was shared, because being wrong about cold could mean losing sleep, movement, or a person who mattered. In that sense, the feeling was useful. It kept ancient humans from treating exposure as minor when the next hours could decide whether everyone stayed together. But usefulness has a cost. A body that keeps bracing for cold can carry that bracing into a heated room, past the window glass, into the quiet after the heater starts. It can make warmth feel less like arrival and more like a brief pause. That is the unresolved problem at the center of this feeling, and it is why the question remains open. What did the body learn to do when that chill returned? The cold returned with weather, with distance, with darkness over open ground. A person felt it first in the fingers, then in the shoulders, before the whole body had time to settle. Around a shelter edge, people drew close by habit, not ceremony. The record shows controlled fire at Wonderwork Cave, and it gives one safe anchor for how ancient humans held back the night long enough to keep moving and resting. But the pressure was always there. Wind cut through thin cover. Wet ground pulled heat away. A child leaned into an adult because standing alone made the loss of body heat faster. The cost here was exposure debt. Every step, every pause, every exposed hand had to be paid for in effort. What did the body learn to do when that chill kept returning? It learned to cluster, to share protected space, and to treat the edge of a shelter as something active. One person stayed closer to the opening. Another made room at the wall. Hides or cloth were pulled over legs and shoulders. Hands were cupped near the torso until feeling crept back. This is where it stops looking simple. The solution was not just being near warmth. but arranging bodies so the group kept enough heat to sleep, recover, and move again. Shared shelter helped because no single body had to carry the cold alone. That mattered on nights when rest had to come inside a narrow margin. The cost here was maintenance labor. Coverings had to be shifted, dry edges kept usable, bodies repositioned, and the most exposed person noticed first. What did that kind of living demand from the body and from attention? It changed what survival felt like from the inside. Ancient humans were not only surviving weather. They were learning that protection came through spacing, closeness, and the steady work of holding a fragile boundary against cold. A group gathered near a wall, child inside the middle, while older hands kept the covering in place and watched the open side of the night. That kind of dependence shaped the body. It made heat feel meaningful when it arrived, and risky when it thinned. The cost here was dependence on managed conditions. Comfort still feels temporary because the old lesson was useful. Safety could shift if the edge failed, the cover loosened, or the room lost its balance. The adaptation solved the night, but it also taught the body to stay alert around ease. What was left behind when the cold finally passed? Now that old lesson shows up in a heated room. A person sits beside an icy window, coat still on the chair, blanket over the lap, one hand hovering near the heater as if the room might slip away. The glass feels hard and far. The shoulders stay tight. The body keeps checking the edge of the window, then the heater, then the blanket again. Shared shelter seeking helped humans endure cold, but it left warmth dependence behind as a quiet expectation that comfort can vanish at any moment. That is the hidden cost. The modern manifestation is icy window restlessness. Warmth is present, yet the body keeps treating it like something temporary. The room is safe. The mind knows that. The body carries a different memory. It still reacts to the idea of exposure, because for a long stretch of human life, cold was not just discomfort. It was a condition that had to be managed together. Comfort still feels temporary, and that phrase lands here with its full weight. Not because the heater is weak, not because the room is failing, but because the body learned to stay near the edge, where loss could begin. What does that make of modern safety? It makes safety feel less like a fact and more like an arrangement the body keeps checking. The person by the window does not need to be in danger for the old pressure to appear. A warm room, a closed door, and a blanket on the lap can still pass through an older test. The body reacts to a world that once made cold exposure serious, and the reaction stays even when the walls hold. That is why a bedroom at night can feel oddly watchful. Why a workroom by a window can leave the shoulders half raised. Why a hand around a mug can linger a second too long over warmth. The ancestral pressure still lives inside the viewer as warmth dependence, and the mind reads it as caution. This is not weakness. It is inherited alertness shaped by survival. It shows how deeply humans were trained to notice loss before loss became real. The question now is not whether the room is warm enough. It is what it means to live with a body that still measures ease against cold. The tension sharpens there, right before the hand moves again. So the opening image comes back unchanged and strange. The icy window, the heater glow, the coat on the chair, the restless hand that wants one more check. Cold exposure taught humans to seek shared shelter and guard warmth closely, and that need did not vanish when blankets and walls arrived. Comfort still feels temporary because the body remembers a world where losing warmth could mean losing safety. That is the peak tension. The hard part is not that the reaction survived. The hard part is that steady comfort still has to pass through an older survival rule before it can feel real. The cost is quiet suspicion of ease, a habit of bracing in a safe room, and a mind that listens for the next chill. In a bedroom at night, in a workroom by a window, in the brief pause around a mug, the same feeling returns. If that leaves one room feeling different, the next story follows: sleep vulnerability and the old cost of closing your eyes. Closed.